Hello and welcome back to Projector LFF. If you missed the previous episodes, be sure to catch up with them via the playlist. On this episode, Mads Mikkelsen and his fellow teachers are getting boozed up in another round. School teachers Martin, played by Mads Mikkelsen, Tommy, played by Thomas Bo Larsen, Peter, played by Lars Ranthe, and Nikolai, played by Magnus Millang, consider a theory that humans are born with a blood alcohol level 0.5 too low. With their lives in ruts and Martin's marriage to Marie Bonnevie's Trini having lost its passion, the teachers decide to test the theory, secretly drinking in the day to see if there's any social and professional benefits. When they find themselves reinvigorated as a result, the teachers decide to start increasing their alcohol intake, but the experiment starts to spiral out of control. Another round, or Druk as it was known in Danish, I'll leave you to work out what that one means, is the latest film from director Thomas Vinterberg, who originally started out as part of the Dogma 95 movement with Lars von Trier, although he's since moved past that and has occasionally flirted with more mainstream fare, including his English language films Far From the Madding Crowd, the 2015 version, and the Russian true life submarine drama Kursk. This also marks another collaboration with Mads Mikkelsen that he previously worked with on 2012's highly acclaimed The Hunt. No, not that one, although it should be said that Another Round is a far more upbeat movie than that. Rather tragically, Vinterberg's daughter passed away during the production of this film. The final movie is dedicated to her, and apparently they shot in the classrooms that she attended, as well as the fact that apparently the script did actually change so it focused less on the alcohol and more on celebrating life in general. Another Round has gone down very well with critics and audiences. It was selected as part of the Cannes Film Festival, which obviously didn't go ahead this year, so it premiered at the fall festivals instead. In fact, at the London Film Festival, it won the Audience Award. It also has been a big success in its native Denmark at the box office, providing a much needed shot in the arm to local cinemas there who are obviously struggling under the weight of the pandemic. Now, what was my opinion of Another Round? I liked it, but I was perhaps not as intoxicated with it as some others were. At its heart, Another Round is a movie about middle-aged malaise. At the beginning of it, Martin is celebrating his 40th birthday, but he appears to have lost his lustre over the years. His classes become dry and boring, and he struggles to engage and motivate his students, who are barely even listening to him, and his marriage has fallen into predictable patterns. Likewise, his fellow teachers are either bearing the weight of new responsibilities because of their families and new children, or are simply just bored with their respective lives. You can see this in the fact that Martin is teetotal at the start of the film, which suggests that he's dried out as a person. He's become a dullard in his older age, and he only starts drinking at his birthday party once he starts confiding how truly unhappy and miserable he is with his life. The difference with Another Round compared to other movies about this subject, though, is that the solution presented here is alcohol. Now, the theory that puts the plot in motion is actually a real one, but the Norwegian scholar who came up with the theory claimed he misspoke and it was misinterpreted. Either way, the film isn't really taking it entirely seriously, it just puts the narrative in motion, in much the same way that the teachers adopt it and decide to study it for an academic paper, but really, it's not really about science or investigating whether there is actually any real effect to it. It's more just an intellectual excuse for them to get drunk and also try to find their youth again, try and find their energy in it. But because it's about alcohol, there is actually a level of danger here. The teachers do actually set rules for their study, but of course they naturally get broken over the course of the film, and there's just a level of threat to the proceedings, not just because of the obvious consequences of misusing alcohol, but also because they're keeping it a secret from their family and co-workers. And as such, there are very real consequences if they get discovered. They could lose their jobs or potentially worse. But even with that being said, I was actually surprised at how lightweight the tone in Another Round is. In fact, for a good chunk of the movie, I would describe it as just a straight-up comedy. And so you have plenty of scenes where the teachers go around and they're a little bit buzzed and they're trying to hide the fact that they are slightly intoxicated, some with better success than others. And so there are actually quite a few humorous scenes in the film. A particular favourite is Martin wandering around the teacher's lounge, struggling to hide just how sloppy he is, and then walking into a wall. And there are plenty of pratfalls and gross out gags like people urinating in beds. At times, it feels like a highbrow Danish equivalent to the likes of something like The Hangover or movies of that type. And certainly there is a kind of irreverence to the proceedings, especially in the sequences where the teachers start trying to up the ante and start trying to build up to their next respective level, and they start drinking together and they put on music they think is cool and start dancing. And as the characters become more and more inebriated, so too does the film itself, especially in terms of its cinematography, which gets more and more handheld, and the balance starts getting more and more shaky. It almost starts getting a little bit more soft focus and hazy as well. It really does accurately reflect what it's like to be a little bit drunk, to the point where I actually felt almost a little bit drunk by osmosis even watching the actors in the film. They actually do a really good job of playing people that are inebriated, and also do a very good job of making you want to watch people that are like that, because let's face it, having to deal with drunks is the absolute worst. But even so, they're very realistically depicted. They don't go over the top with it. It's all very believable in its own way. It's a credit to the actors that they managed to keep this grounded, because they could have potentially played drunk very, very badly. There are numerous examples of that. Although I would describe this film as an ensemble that focuses on each of the four teachers, it's Mads Mikkelsen that's easily the standout here. He's got the role that's got the greatest change and transformation across the running time, going from someone who is quite low and miserable to someone who is playful and energetic. And Mikkelsen is an extremely charismatic performer, as you probably already know, and his distinctive features are well suited to both sides of this role. In fact, I would describe this as the loosest I've ever seen Mikkelsen on screen. There's a sense of fun and frivolity to his performance that you really don't see in a lot of his Western work, where he's pigeonholed into playing villains and brooding figures. And so it was nice to see a different side of Mikkelsen, but as always, he is extremely engaging, and this may well be one of the best performances he's given to date. And the teachers begin to notice that as the alcohol lowers their inhibitions, they take more chances, they experiment more, which are positively received in their lives. Martin in particular benefits from the fact that his classroom style completely changes, so it's much more theatrical and engages students more as he extols the virtues of Winston Churchill. He finds that spark again, and it does feel like, for a certain amount of time, like the alcohol is actually being a benefit to their lives. And this was an element of the movie that definitely had me a little bit concerned somewhat, because there are definitely times when I was watching Other Round where it genuinely felt like an ad for alcoholism, perhaps not a feeling completely unwarranted given that Mads Mikkelsen does promotional adverts for Carlsberg, so I definitely had that association in my mind. But there is definitely a carefree attitude, at least for a certain amount of time, with the way that alcohol is depicted, that I do think that some viewers may well object to. And I think that may come into where I had issues with the film. Now, admittedly, I'm probably not the best person to talk about a movie like Another Round to begin with, because I personally am mostly teetotal. If it's a special occasion and I'm feeling fancy, I might have a JD and Coke. So obviously, that's going to sort of alter my perceptions of the movie, but I certainly think that the film definitely has an ambivalent attitude towards its subject matter. It doesn't explicitly condemn the characters for their actions simply for the sake of drinking. And on one level, that's fine, because I do think that if it was like that, it would start feeling like an after-school special. It would feel extremely moralistic and heavy-handed. And while the characters' actions are not without consequence, it does feel like the movie is maybe a little bit too uncritical of them at times. While it is trying to be ambiguous about what it says about alcohol, neither leaning towards one side or the other, it does feel at points like it may be subtly condoning it. There is a subplot involving a student that has extreme exam anxiety to the point where it's ruining his grades, so he's taken aside and encouraged to start drinking before the exams to loosen up his nerves, and that felt a little bit uncomfortable to me, bordering on maybe being a little bit reckless. I don't know, I'm just quite concerned about these things because obviously alcohol abuse is a serious problem in many countries around the world, and certainly I'd be very interested to hear from someone who's experienced that firsthand, their feelings about the depiction in this film. I'd imagine it'd be fairly complicated. But even so, I do think the movie doesn't have much in the way of sort of social satire or commentary. Obviously, Denmark is well known for its drinking culture, but there isn't really much said in Another Round about it. Although Martin's Swedish wife throws this very offhand comment about the fact that, oh, you Danish, always drinking all the time, or something along those lines, that's pretty much the only real allusion to anything like that, which is a real shame. That feels like a missed opportunity. It certainly doesn't have very much to say about a world that is so busy and so stressful that people feel the need to drink just to get through the day. And that just feels like maybe Another Round missed a chance to be something slightly more substantial. Of course, naturally, given all the characters are teetering on the edge of self-destruction, they eventually go over the edge, and once that happens, Another Round becomes a much darker film as it goes into its more dramatic third act, where the characters sober up very quickly once they experience the ramifications of their actions. And I think that here, where you really start to get the tragedy in this movie, I think it becomes more tonally unbalanced. I think that because it was so light-footed earlier on, it feels like an even more jarring shift later, when really this should have underpinned the action in the first 2/3 of the movie, and instead it feels like it's very awkward because it does feel like you're suddenly watching a very different film, and I don't think the movie quite knows how to handle it, especially as it has fatal consequences for at least one member of the group. But at the same time, it tries to have a relatively upbeat ending. What I will say about the ending, and especially that final scene, is that it's easily one of the most memorable of any movie in 2020. It's very rare that you watch something and you immediately know that it's going to become iconic, but Mads Mikkelsen dancing jazz ballet is exactly that, and Mikkelsen throws himself into it. He used to be a dancer, and you can definitely tell. It's a sequence that is joyous and euphoric and extremely public, and it's a brilliant sequence, but in the wider context of the rest of the film, it does feel a little bit odd, especially what comes immediately preceding it, which is so somber, and then this happens, and it does feel quite strange. I think what makes it work is that music choice of What a Life, which makes it feel both happy and sad simultaneously. Even the filmmakers were wondering if it actually worked as the capper to their movie, and it does, because it's just so magical on the screen. Mikkelsen just twirling around. And I think it also hints at the real message of the film, which is enjoy responsibly, which is the message on many a can of alcohol, but also just life itself. It is to be appreciated and cherished, and that's exactly what Martin is doing at the conclusion of this movie. And frankly, just watching Mikkelsen dance, that is pure cinema. I do recommend another round. It's got a strong cast, especially Mikkelsen, it's well directed, and it's surprisingly funny, which genuinely caught me off guard. It is an effective comedy drama, but it also feels somewhat uneven, especially if you're like me and you find yourself uneasy with the way the film depicts the subject matter. I do think that to some extent that's intentional, because it's meant to be a discussion point with audiences after they've seen the film as to where they think the characters might have overstepped the line and what their limit would be. But for me personally, all throughout the running time, it just gave me pause for thought. And admittedly, that's probably my own feelings about the subject altering my perceptions of the film, but I can only report these reviews how I experienced them. I just found it gave the movie a bit of a bitter aftertaste. If you like this review, then you can buy me a pint over at my Ko-fi page, which I've just launched, or you can start a tab over at my Patreon, where you can see my reviews early, among other perks, including access to my Discord server. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.